In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this beautiful to-do list app using Vuetify and Vue.js from scratch in 30 gosh darn mother flipping minutes. If you're new here, my name's Danny. I'm an indie app developer and creator of Fudgit. If you want to learn how to create cross-platform apps and web apps using technologies like Vue.js, click subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss anything. So let's take a look at this app that we're going to build. So it has a drawer which can be toggled with this button with links to our 2 pages, an about page and a to-do page. It has this gorgeous tall header with a background image of mountains and clouds. It has this text field with a button which we can use to add tasks. We can mark a task as done by clicking on it, and we can delete a task by clicking this delete button. And it's also going to look great on both mobile and desktop as well. Let's get started with Vuetify. So you want to go to vuetifyjs.com, click on Get Started, and we're going to be using the Vue CLI. And if you don't have that installed, then you want to click through to this link, click on Get Started and Installation. And it says here, Vue CLI requires Node.js. So you need to install that first if you don't already. And you probably want to download the one on the left here. And then you can install the Vue CLI with this command. So I'm just going to run that in my terminal. Okay, the Vue CLI is now installed and we can now create a new Vue project. So we want to jump back to the Vuetify page and we basically want to create a new Vue app with the Vue create command, cd into it, and then run Vue add Vuetify to add Vuetify to the project. So you want to make sure you're in the folder where you store all your projects and then run Vue create and then the name of our app. And I'm going to call this Vuetify-to-do. And we want to choose manually select features. And we can use the spacebar here to select or deselect options. So we want to enable Router and Vuex and CSS preprocessors. And you want to make sure you disable the linter. And then we can just hit enter. And it's asking us which version of Vue we want to use. And at the time I'm recording this, Vuetify doesn't support Vue 3. For now, you want to choose version 2. Use history mode for Router. We want to choose no to that. Pick a CSS preprocessor. I'm going to choose Sass with SCSS. Where do you prefer placing config? I'm going to choose in dedicated config files. Save this as a preset. I'm going to choose no to that. Okay, it's finished creating our Vue project, but we still need to add Vuetify to it. So we need to cd into the folder and run Vue add Vuetify. And I have the folder where I keep my projects here, and I can see the project it's just created, Vuetify to do. So I'm going to drag that into my editor, open up my terminal, and run Vue add Vuetify. And we want to choose the default preset. And it's finished adding Vuetify to the project. So if we open up the package.json file, we can see a couple of scripts here. So we just want to run this serve script. So I'm just going to run npm run serve. Okay, our app is now running and it gives us a link here. So we can just command and click on that to open it in the browser. So our basic Vuetify app is now running, and Vuetify has some wireframes that can really help us get started with our layout. So we want to go to the Vuetify site, then getting started, and then wireframes. And I'm going to use this base wireframe. So this wireframe has a nice navigation drawer that we can use to add some links. And if we click on this button down at the bottom, then we can see the source code. So I'm just going to copy all of this source code. So I'm going to go to source, then app.vue. I'm just going to paste over this entire thing and save that. And we now have a nice starter layout for our app. And this drawer will be toggled on desktop by clicking this button. And on mobile, it will be hidden by default, but can still be toggled with this button. Let's add some navigation links to this drawer so that we can navigate the pages of our app. So I'm going to jump to the Vuetify site and go to UI components and navigation drawers. And this basic drawer looks pretty good. So I'm going to click on View Source on that, and I'm just going to copy the vNavigation drawer component. Before we paste over our existing vNavigation drawer component, we can see it has the vModel set to drawer, which is this data property down here. And this is what's determining whether this navigation drawer is shown or hidden. And it also has this app prop as well. So let's just see what that's doing. So I'm going to jump to API, click on this link. So the app prop designates the component as part of the application layout. So this prop basically just makes the component part of our global layout. So I'm just going to paste over that code that we copied over this vNavigation drawer. I'll save that And we can see that this doesn't have those props. So I'm just going to add those. So we need to add a V model, set that to draw. And we need to add this app prop as well. So I'll save that. And you can see the top part of the draw, but we can't see the navigation links. Let's have a look at the console. Property or method items is not defined, but referenced during render. So within this navigation draw, we have a vlist with a v-for loop, which is looking for an array called items, which we don't currently have in our data property. So I'm going to jump back to the navigation draw page and click on view source again. And as well as a template tab, we also sometimes have a script tab as well. And we can see that items array here. So we need to add this to our data array. So I'm going to copy that items array and add it to our data. So I'm just going to split this up onto multiple lines and paste in this items array. So I'll save that. And we can now see these navigation items. And we're only going to need 2 pages in our app, a to-do page and an about page. So I'm just going to modify this array here. I'll get rid of the photos item, save that. And now we just have 2 items, and I'll rename the first one to do and save that. And I'll also change this title and subtitle up here. So I'll just change the app name to Vuetify To Do and change this subtitle to Best To Do Ever. Save that. Okay, this is looking pretty good now, although these links aren't currently doing anything. So let's set up some pages and routes. So we do this in this index.js file in the router folder. And if we look in there, we already have some routes set up. One at the path slash, which is pointing to this home.view component, which is in the views folder, and one route at the path slash about, which is pointing to this about.view component. However, these are not currently working because we don't see a home page when we're at the path slash, or if we go to slash about, then we don't see an about page. And if we go to the Vuetify site, and then UI components and application, and down to default application markup, tells us that if we're using Vue Router, which we are, then we need to add this router view component. So let's jump to our app.vue file. We need to place this inside our vmain component. So let's just add that router view component here and save that. And if we now go to the path slash, we can see this homepage component is being loaded. And if in the address bar we go to slash about, then we can see the about page. And navigating our app with the address bar isn't much fun, so let's hook up these links in our navigation drawer. So I'm just going to jump to app.vue and take a look at this list, which is spitting out these links. So we have a vlist component, and then within that we have a vlist item component for each item. So I'm going to jump to Vuetify, UI components, and lists, and jump to the API section and then vlist item. Let's see how we can add a link to this. So I'm going to scroll down and we have this to prop, and this denotes the target route of the link. So we can just add a to prop to each vlist item and set it to the path that we want it to go to. And these items are being pulled in dynamically from this items array. So let's add a new property to each one called to. The to-do link wants to just go to the path slash, and then the about link wants to go to the path slash about. And then we need to bind these properties to our view. So I'll jump to the vlist item and add a to prop. And just set this to item.to. So I'll save that. And let's see if we can navigate now. And yeah, it looks like we can. And let's see if we can change the icon for this to-do link here. So if we go to Vuetify and then UI components and then icons. So it says that we can use all of the material design icons from this page. So I'm going to open up this page. And we have tons of different icons we can use, and we can search as well. So I'm going to search for to do. And this icon looks pretty good. And the name for this icon is format-list-checks. So if we just jump back to app.vue and down to our data, so we can just change this icon property here to MDI format list checks. So MDI format list checks. Save that. And we can now see our icon updated. Let's get our pages ready. So let's do the About page first. So we want to go to Source, Views, About.view. I'm just going to change the text in this heading to About Vuetify To-do. I'm just going to add some paragraphs with some lorem ipsum. Save that. We could do with a bit of padding on this page. And if we go to the Vuetify site and styles and animations and spacing, we have some really handy padding and margin classes that we can use. And the way we use these classes is, if we want to use padding, then we use the letter P, and then a letter to denote the direction of the padding, and then we just add a dash, and then a number to denote the size of the padding. So the larger the number, the more the padding, or the margin. So let's add some padding to our About page. So I'm just going to add a class to this div. So P for padding, A for all directions, and then a dash. And then let's just try 6 and save that. And that looks pretty good. Okay, let's work on our to-do page now. And our to-do page component is currently called home.view. So let's rename that to to-do.view. And this has now broken our app, because if we go to our router file, router index.js, it's currently looking for a component called home.view, which no longer exists. So we need to replace all occurrences of home with to-do. So here and here, we want to change the name of the route to to-do as well. And change this to to-do. Let's save that, and it's now working again. So let's get rid of all this stuff on our to-do page. So we'll open up to-do.view. I'm just going to get rid of everything inside this div and just add a heading which says to-do page. We'll add the same padding class we added to the About page, so PA-6. We no longer need this hello world component, so we can get rid of this import. We can get rid of this components object. We can also delete the hello world component as well in the components folder. Let's improve this header. And if we go to our app.view file, this header is this v-appbar component. So let's see if we can find a nicer one on the Vuetify site. So we want to go to UI components, and then bars, and then app bars. I'm going to scroll down, look for a really nice one. And this looks really good with this background image, and it's nice and tall. So I'm going to click on the view source button, just copy the v-appbar component. Before we paste over this one, let's just note that this v-appbar component currently has an app prop on it, which designates it as part of the global layout. And also this v-appbar nav icon, which is this button here, has a click handler on it, which is just toggling the draw prop to show and hide the draw. So let's paste over this code we've copied and save that. I'm just going to reload that. And the header is currently overlapping our content. We can't see the heading. And I think that's because, one, it doesn't have that app prop that we need for all of our layout components. And also because it has this absolute prop. Because if we go to the v-appbar API, this absolute prop will apply absolute positioning to the component. So let's replace that prop with the app prop and save that. And we can now see our page content again. This v-appbar has this shrink on scroll prop, which will cause this header to shrink when we scroll down, but I want it to stay nice and tall. So I'm going to remove that prop and also remove this scroll target prop. Save that. And our app bar has now gone small again. So I'm going to jump back to the API and scroll down. And we have this prominent prop, which increases the height of the toolbar content to 128 pixels. So I'm going to add this prop to it, prominent. Save that. And it's now nice and tall again. When we reload the page, we can briefly see this kind of beige color in the background. And that's because of this color prop we have on the app bar. So let's change it to our primary color, which is a nice blue color. And we can set it to our primary color by just changing this to primary. Save that. And that looks a bit better when it reloads. This image in the app bar, which is coming from this source prop on the v-appbar component, is currently randomized every time we reload the page. Let's change this to a permanent image, which is always displayed. So I'm going to go to a site called pixabay.com and search for mountains and scroll down. And this looks pretty nice. So I'm going to click on that, click on download, and I'm going to drag this into our public folder because any files in here will be available at the root of our app. So I'm just going to rename that file to just mountains.jpg, jump back to app.vue, and this source prop on the v app bar, I'm just going to change this to mountains.jpg, save that, and we now see that image in the header instead. Let's change this title here, and that's in this V toolbar title component, so I'll change that to Vuetify To. This menu button here, which is this V app bar nav icon component, is no longer working because remember in our old app bar, this V app bar nav icon had a click handler on it, which was toggling this draw property, thus toggling the navigation draw on the page. So let's just put that click handler back in. So we just want to add @click equals, and we just want to set draw equal to the opposite of draw. So I'll save that, and let's see if that's now working. And yeah, that's now working. Let's start working on our to-do page. So we're going to need a list of tasks. So I'm going to jump to the Vuetify site, go to UI components and lists. And I'd like our list items to have checkboxes. So let's see if we can find something like that. And this looks pretty good. These items here. So I'm going to click on view source and try and find that bit in the code. And it's this vlist we want here. So I'm going to copy this vlist component and jump to our to-do page, source views to-do.view, and we'll paste this over this h1 that's on our page currently and save that. We don't need this subheading thing here, which is this v subheader component, so I'll get rid of that. And I assume we can also get rid of this subheader prop as well. And I'd like our tasks to stretch all the way across the width of the app. So I'm going to get rid of this padding class that we added to this parent div. Save that. And I don't think we need this vlist item group component. So I think this is for forms and stuff like that where you have multiple options. So let's get rid of that component. Get rid of the closing tag as well. Just nudge all the vlist items back. And I'm just going to remove all but the first vlist item. So I'll get rid of all the others. We don't need 2 lines on our list items. We just need 1 line for the task name. So I'm going to get rid of this vlist item subtitle component. And then I guess we can also get rid of this 2-line prop and save that. And I quite like the look of this now. So let's change this notifications text to the name of a task. So let's call it wake up. Save that. Let's add a data property where we can store all of our tasks data. So I'm going to jump down to the script section and add a data method that returns an object. And we'll create an array called tasks. And we'll create an object for each task. And we're going to need some kind of unique ID for each task. So we'll add a property called ID, set the first one to 1. And we're going to need a title as well. So I'll set this to wake up. And I'll just duplicate this a couple of times. And I'll replace these numbers with numbers from 1 to 3. And I'll change the title of the second task to get bananas. And change the title of the third task to eat bananas. Save that. And we want to spit these out on the page. So I'm going to add a v-for loop to this vlist item. So we want to do v-for task in tasks to loop through this tasks array. And we see red squiggly lines here. And that's because whenever we use a v-for, we need to use a key prop as well and set that to some kind of unique identifier. So we'll add a key prop and just set that to task.id. These IDs we've added here, and I'll save that. And we can now see 3 tasks on the page, but we're not spitting out our title. So let's replace this text wake up with double curly braces and task.title. And we can now see our 3 tasks on the page. Now I'd like to add a divider between each item, like a little line. And if we jump to the Vuetify site and components and dividers, then we have this divider component that we can use. So I'm going to copy that. And I don't think we can just paste this vDivider component inside the vList item. Although let's just give that a try. Save that. and that's not worked. So that needs to be outside of the vList item. But our v-for loop is on this vList item. With a v-for loop, we can only display one element or one component for each iteration of the for loop. So I'm just going to get rid of that v-divider we put in there. What we might need to do is add a parent component. We could just use a div and place our vList item inside that div. And then we can move the v-for loop to the div and the key prop as well. So I'll move this up to the div. And hopefully we can now paste this v-divider component after this vList item. So I'll paste that here. I'll save that. And we can now see a divider between each item. And we seem to have a space above this first item. So I'm just going to inspect this list. It looks like we got a bit of padding at the top there. So I'm just going to add one of Vuetify's padding classes to this vList. I'll just add P for padding, T for top, -0 for 0 padding. And it's got rid of that gap at the top. If you found this video useful so far, make sure you smash the like button and leave a comment below telling me which app you'd like to see me make with Vuetify. Let's add the ability to mark our tasks as done when we click on them. So we're going to need a data property for each task to determine whether the task is done or not. So I'm going to add a new property to each of our tasks in the task array called done. We'll set these to false initially and save that. And if we look at this v checkbox component, which is our checkbox here, and it has this input value prop, and this will determine whether or not this checkbox is checked, depending on whether what we pass in here is true or false. So we could just pass this done property in there. So I'll change this to task.done and save that. And so now hopefully if we set one of our tasks done properties to true, then we should see this checkbox checked, which we do. And I guess we don't need to pass this active variable into this slot anymore. So I'm just going to remove this prop value and the equal symbol. And I'm just going to change this second task back to false, this done property. And so when we click these tasks, we want to toggle this done property. So if it's false, we want to set it to true. And if it's true, we want to set it to false. So let's add a click handler to each of our list items. So we'll add @click and we'll fire a method called doneTask and we'll pass in the task ID. So I'll pass task.id into there and we'll set up this method. So we need to add a methods object and add this doneTask method, which is expecting an ID. And I'll just log out the ID for now to make sure that's working. So if we click on a task, we see ID 1 being logged out, or ID 2 if it's the second task. So when this method is fired, we want to grab the correct task from this tasks array based on the ID. So we can use a filter to do this. So we'll set up a variable for the task that we're going to grab. I'll just call this task. And then we'll use a filter on this tasks array. So I'm going to do this .tasks.filter, and this filter method is going to iterate through each of these tasks in the array. So first we need a placeholder for the current task that it's looking at, so we'll just call that task, and then we need a method with the condition that we're looking for, and the condition that we're looking for is that the task ID is equal to the ID that we're passing in to this doneTask method. So what we can do is task.id is equal to ID. So now that we have the task, we just want to set the done property to the opposite of itself. So we can just do task.done equals the opposite of task.done. So I'll save that. I'll click on a task and that's not working. And that's because this filter will actually return an array of objects, not just the single object of the task. So we need to actually just grab the first item of the array by adding square brackets and 0 at the end. So I'll save that and click on a task. And that's working. We can now see the done status being toggled, and we can see that in the view as well with these checkboxes. Let's also change the background color on the task when it is marked as done. And if we go to the Vuetify site and styles and animations and colors, then we have a bunch of different color classes that we can use. So if we want to use this red color, then we just add a class of red. And if we want to lighten that red color, we can add an additional class such as lighten-5 or lighten-4. So let's try this blue color. So we're going to conditionally add this class blue to the VListItem component, but only if the task is done. So we'll bind to the class attribute. We'll add a class of blue, and the condition is task.done. So if the done property for the current task is true, then we're going to add this class. So I'll save that and click on a task. And that's working, but this blue looks a bit dark, so let's lighten it a bit. So I want it to be quite light like this. So let's try this lighten-5 class. So we'll also conditionally add that class as well if the task is done. So lighten-5, save that. And that's looking pretty good now, I think. And it'd be good if we could also strike through this text when a task is done. So I'm going to jump to the Vuetify site and go to text and typography and jump down to text decoration. And we can see some line through text here. We can apply this style by just using this text decoration line through class. So I'm just going to copy that class, and we just want to add that class to this title, which is this VListItem title component. I'm just going to break this component up onto multiple lines, and we'll conditionally bind to the class attribute again. And this time we're going to add the class that we just copied, text decoration line through, but only if task.done is true. So save that and click on a task. And we now see that our done tasks are crossed out. Let's add the ability to delete a task. So we're going to need some kind of button over on the right hand side of each task that we can click to delete that task. So I'm going to jump to the Vuetify site, go to UI components and lists. And let's see if we can find a list item with an icon over on the right. Okay, this looks pretty good. These list items have this information icon over on the right. So let's click on view source and try and find that information icon button, which is here. So it looks like we just need to add this VListItem action component with a V button component and a V icon component. So I'm just going to copy this code and we'll paste it inside our VListItem at the bottom of that, I would say. And we'll just indent that and save it. We're not seeing that, so maybe it needs to be inside this default slot here. So I'm going to move that up and save that. And we now see that information button, but we want a delete button. So I'm going to jump to the material design icons page and search for delete. And this will do this little bin icon. So we just need to use the name delete or MDI-delete. So let's change this MDI information icon to MDI delete. Save that. And we now see a delete button. And I'm also going to change the color to our primary color instead of gray. And that looks pretty good now. So let's add a click handler to this V button. I'll just split the attributes and add a click handler. And we already have a click handler on our VListItem components. And we don't want that to be triggered when we click on this delete button, which is a child element of that. So to stop it from triggering the click on that parent component, we can just add a .stop modifier to this click handler. Let's trigger a method called delete task, and we'll pass in the task ID. And we'll create that method. So delete task, this is going to expect an ID. So we want to remove the task which has the ID that we're passing in here from this tasks array. And again, we can do that with a filter. So what I'm going to do is use a filter to grab only the tasks from this array which don't have the ID that we're passing in here. So what I'm going to do is this.tasks equals this.tasks.filter. Pass in a placeholder. We'll just call that task. And we only want to return the tasks where the ID is not equal to the ID we're passing into this method here. So what we can do is task.id is not equal to ID. So let's save that, see if it works. I'll click on the delete button and that's now working. This app won't be much fun if we can't actually add a task. So let's add a text field where we can type the name of a task and a button that we can click to actually add a new task to our list. So I'll jump to the Vuetify site, UI components, form inputs and controls, and then text fields. And I'm going to look for a text field which has a button on the side that we can click. So I'm going to jump down to icons, and I'd like something like this one here with a button inside the text field. So I think this will be the second from the bottom in the source code. So I'll click view source and see if I can find that one. And I think it's this one here. So I'm going to copy that. Let's just paste it above our vlist. Just collapse that for now. And paste that here at the top of this home div. And save that. And we could do with a bit of padding around this field. So I'm going to add a padding class to it. So class PA for padding all around, dash. Now let's try 2, maybe a little bit more. Let's try 3, and that looks better. And let's change this label that says append to add task. Let's change this icon to some sort of add icon. So I'll jump to the material icons page, search for add. And this one looks pretty good. So we just need to use the name plus. So this append icon prop, we're just going to change that to MDI-plus. Save that. And we have quite a big space at the bottom of this field. And that space is reserved for hints and validation messages and stuff. And we're not going to need that space. And there is a prop we can use to get rid of that. So I'm going to jump back to the text field page, jump to API, click through to the API page, and scroll down. And we have this hide details prop, which hides hint and validation errors. So I'm going to add that to this text field component, hide details, and save that. And that extra space now disappears. And it'd be good if we could easily clear this field by displaying a little cross icon here or something, which you often see in fields. And there is a prop we can add, which is the clearable prop, add input clear functionality. So let's add that prop as well. So clearable, save that. And if we type now, we see this little X, which we can click to clear the field. And now let's add a new data property to store our new task title and bind it to this text field. So I'm going to add a V model to this text field, and we'll call it new task title. We'll add that to our data as well. So I'll just add that here, new task title. We'll set that to an empty string. Actually, we'll just type something in there just to make sure it's binding correctly. And yeah, we can see hello in the text field. So I'll set that back to an empty string. And we need to add a click handler to this plus button. And we don't have direct access to that button here. It's being added with this append icon prop. But if we jump to the API page for the text field, and if we jump down to events, then we have this click append event that we can add, which is emitted when the appended icon is clicked. So at click :append. And let's trigger a method called add task. We need to create this method. Actually, I'll put that at the top. Add task. And for now, I'm just going to log out add task. Save that. So if we click this button, we should see add task logged out, which we do. And it'd be also good if this method was fired when we hit enter as well. So I'm going to jump back up to this text field. And we'll add a key up event, so at key up, and we'll add a .enter modifier. So this will be triggered whenever we hit enter when we're in that field. And we'll also just fire the same method, add task. Let's make sure that's working. So if I hit enter in this field, yeah, we see add task being logged out. So let's work on our add task method. So what we want to do in this method is set up an object, much like this one, with a random ID and the title, which is going to be grabbed from this new task title property, a done property as well, and then just push this object to this tasks array where we should then see it on the page. So let's first just set up our new task object. So I'll just do let new task equals, and we're going to need an ID property. And to make sure this ID is unique, we could just use the current date timestamp. So for our ID, we could just do date.now. And then we're going to need a title property, which we're going to grab from this new task title property, which is bound to this text field. So for this, we can just do this dot new task title. And then we're also going to need a done property, which should be set to false initially. So this is our new task object set up, and now we just want to push it to this tasks array. So now we can just do this dot tasks dot push new task. So let's save that and see if it's working. So let's add a new task. So poo bananas, and it's working. It's adding it to our page. And we can still see what we've just typed in this field. So let's also clear this new task title property, thus clearing the field. So we could just do this dot new task title equals empty string. Save that. Let's try that again. Poo bananas, and yeah, it now clears the field. Let's just comment out all the items in our tasks array here. Just make sure our app is working from scratch. I'll just reload it. Let's see if we can add some tasks. So wake up, get bananas, eat bananas, poo bananas, see doctor about poo bananas. So we can add tasks, we can mark them as done, and we can delete them as well. If you want to learn more about Vuetify and its components by adding a load of functionality to this app, then check out the full course at dannys.link/Vuetify. In this course, we're going to add this no tasks icon and message, which will be displayed when there are no tasks, and this will disappear when there are tasks. We're also going to add these notifications that you can see at the bottom using a snack bar component, and these will be displayed whenever we add, edit, or delete a task. We're going to replace our delete button with a menu with 4 different options, and if we click on edit, then we can edit the name of the task with this dialog component which appears. Or if we click on the due date option, we can see a date picker component and we can choose a due date for the task. And once selected, this will be added to the side of the task there. And if we choose the delete option, we now see a dialog making sure that we really want to delete the task before it's actually deleted. And if we choose the sort option, then we see these drag handles appear and we can actually reorder our tasks with drag and drop. We're also going to pimp out the drawer by adding an image, an avatar, a name, and a username. And we're going to pimp out our header too by moving our add task field into it, adding this live date and time component, and also adding this animated expanding search field that we can use to filter our tasks. We're also going to add Vuex to our app. And we're going to move all of our core data and logic into a Vuex store to make our app easier to manage. So we'll be adding some state, mutations, actions, and getters. And we're also going to break our app up into a bunch of different child components to, again, make our app easier to manage. And we're also going to make the data of our app persist in the user's browser in an IndexedDB database. So you can see an IndexedDB database here with all of the data for our tasks. We're going to be adding this with a package called localbase. And this means that even if we close the browser and reopen it, or if we reload the app, then all of our data is maintained. And after we finish testing and fixing our app on real iOS and Android devices, we're going to build this sucker for production and deploy it to Netlify. You can also, of course, get the finished source code for the app. And if there's anything you found confusing in this video, then chances are it will be explained in the full course, because I did chop quite a lot of stuff out for this YouTube video. So if that sounds interesting, go to dannys.link/Vuetify or click the link at the top of the description.